Is this thing on? What's going on? I can see all of you watching me. Hey guys, it's Tim with Tabletop Terrors, and this is Daily Damage. Daily Damage is a live stream we do most weekdays, and we tend to put them on YouTube, but we love talking, we love hanging out, and so this is a good way to do both of those things. I always start Daily Damage, aside from being really close to my eye, with the rundown. The rundown is while the stream itself shares, I just talked to you about some things you should check out. And so for this edition of Daily Damage, the rundown is going to be pretty simple. Right now, you need to mark your calendars because we get this question all the time. Guys at Absolute Tabletop, how do you make an RPG supplement? Well, this Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, we're going to go through, and the entire AbTab team is going to be running through how we make a tabletop RPG supplement. It's going to be no holds barred, a ladder match, inside the ladder. Inside the briefcase on top of the ladder is hot and ready's. But join us. There's also a thread. I'm going to make one on the Absolute Tabletop Facebook page as well, where people can ask questions. The end of the panel is going to be us answering your questions. So the first part of the panel is just going to be us working through our process, from brainstorming all the way to a finished product, and then some marketing and stuff like that. But if you have questions, I'm going to make a post on the Absolute Tabletop Facebook. If you're a part of the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, you can already see that there's a thread and people have been asking some amazing questions. So that is the very simple join us on Saturday rundown. If you're interested in being a part of the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, just search us on Facebook and you can find us there. So that is the rundown. Keep that very short and basic. Let us visit the chat. I'm trying to be very mindful because when I click the screen with my thumbs, I can hear it in the stream. It goes. Dragon Eggs Benedict is here. Andre Martinez, my man. Andre Martinez is one of the best game masters that I've ever seen run Star Wars. And if you get a chance, ask him to do a Lando Calrissian impression for you, because it's terrifying. I saw that Childish Gambino, old Donnie Boy, got the part for Lando, and I thought, that's miscast. It should have been Andre. Nathan Thurston, woo! Carol Dunster joined. Hey, you're live this time. And Carol, this is going to be great because we're going to go over some session prep tips. And I know you said you needed some of those. Melvin Victorio joined. Justin Rio is also live. Carol Dunster. Oh, a thread, not a bread. And here I thought Tim was making bread, and I was excited to see him branching out. Timpson! Rob Coletta from Performance Check is here. And in fact, if you're not subscribed to Performance Check, you need to rethink your life. Because Performance Check it's a very new channel, but Rob hit the ground running. His content is fantastic. I'm a part of a game over there called The Lore Keepers, and he's actually starting a series of one-shots to flesh out his world. You will miss those one-shots if you don't subscribe. Rob is a fantastic, charismatic storytelling GM, so you don't want to miss out on Performance Check. All right, so we're going to talk about session prep. There are 1 million videos about session prep around, and this is a hot topic. So I was thinking, because I'm prepping for a Copper Jackals game that I'm running on Saturday for BrigadeCon. You got to go to brigadecon.org. If you're not a part, you need to be a part of that. Listen to Rupert and Borneo on the Tabletop Terrors channel. So I have to do my prep for that. And I started thinking, and I've really streamlined my prep process. I used to be very, very prep light, which works, but there are some flaws in there. And I've identified that, and I'll go over this later, but I've identified that if you combine sort of the prep light mentality and then focus on the right things when you prep, you're going to hit a home run. Mike Merles said it the best, and he's the lead designer, or was, at the time he said this, for Dungeons and Dragons. I know he still has, I don't remember his title. I think Jeremy Crawford's the lead designer. Anyway, Mike Merles wears a big hat at Wizards of the Coast, and he's in charge of a lot of fancy things. Cool guy, too, from what I can tell in interviews. The point is he said, you're going to use 10% of what you prep. And by and large, I think he's right. So what that makes me think is, okay, well, then I better prep the correct 10%. So if I can, and you can even liken this to the 80-20 rule, right? Where it's like 20% of the right input is going to get you 80% of the output. So that's what I want to talk to you about with session prep. So the first hack with session prep that I think people need to realize is that much like cooking a really good meal, you absolutely should tailor the style of prep you use to the style of game you're prepping. There is not one way. Now, that is not something I like to hear because it can be a cop-out. When you say to me like, hey, how do you do it? And then the answer is, well, it's kind of different every time. Yeah, well, give me a framework. I know it's different every time, but do you just make it up as you go along? Most DMs don't. But I think that the first thing you need to get in your mind is prep for the game you're running. If you're running a murder mystery, that's going to take a very different style of prep than if you're running a horde-style combat or a mass battle. And so that's the first thing. The first thing you need to get in your mind is that every time you prep, you should stop and say, all right, what style of prep method am I going to use? What am I going to focus on? What am I going to draw inspiration from? And by thinking of that, you're not going to get yourself locked into Googling, how do I prep a session? If you say, okay, I want to prep something that I can run that's going to have some levity. I want there to be a lot of action. And, I definitely want there to be a good set of role play here. Okay, now you know where you're headed. So this is going to be the kind of the second hack. And I made notes here because I prepped. Here's the thing. And this, if you're a game master, admit this to yourself. You know this is true. You want to just surprise the players. You want to be the performer. You want to be the one who has gone away to your lab in the basement or in the marshes, and you've concocted the most brilliant session, and you want to lay it before them, and you want them to feast upon it and love every bit of it. And you shouldn't. You should communicate with your players. I am guilty of this. I want to surprise my players. I like to perform. I like to, I love the reveal. If you've seen any games, every character I play, usually by about the second session or halfway through the first session, there'll be sort of a turn, a reveal where I reveal something about that character that wasn't evident. I love that. And that can all still be present. But here's what I'm saying. Game masters, just come right out and say to your players, hey, what sorts of challenges do you want to see this character come up against? Here's why. Okay, let's take tabletop games out of this altogether. Let's say you're starting to date somebody, you want to impress them, and you're going to just go to the lab and you're going to surprise them by making them dinner. Well, what if they have a shellfish allergy? What if they hate pasta? And you go toiling away and you're like, here you go, here's this shrimp fettuccine. And they're like, I literally can't eat that. It's like, if you ask the players these sort of broad strokes, hey, what sorts of challenges do you want to see this character come up against? Oh, well, I'd love to see something that really taxes me physically, or I'd love to see something that challenges me mentally, whatever. Then you can go back to the lab. Now you have a framework. Now you know, okay, this girl I'm dating loves Indian cuisine and chicken is her favorite protein. Boom, chicken tikka masala. Now I can make a really good thing and bring it back, and I already know that it's going to be something that I'm setting myself up to succeed with. If you do this, how can you possibly do this for all the players? There's 4 or 5. This is an easy one. And you'll watch, this is exactly what Matt Click, he did this in Provoker Season 1. Let one of the players be the player who gets that kind of focus per session. By doing that, the other players will still be involved and they can rally around the cause. But if I say, hey, I really want to see what Durgan would do in a scenario where he's faced with whether he would take a life or not. Well, everyone else is around. And so now it's up to Matt to say, okay, I can maybe kind of make that work. And by prepping that way, getting a baseline and actually talking to your players, as simple as that sounds, you will find that they are going to feed you exactly what you need to then go back, do your magic trick, surprise them. You're still going to put a twist on it. We both know you're not going to just do exactly what they asked. You're going to tie two things together from two players, and that's where you can shine, but at least you're playing in the right ballpark. Okay, so that's a big hack. It's just talk to your players and fight the urge to want to just put up the cloak and do it all, yourself. Let's check the chat. Rob Coletta. I want that one on my gravestone, Tim. Thank you. Rob, if we put anything I ever said on your gravestone, it would have to be the size of a mausoleum. I talk too much, it would just be like, here lies Rob Coletta. Blah, 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 blah. You get it. Spencer Shields is here. Carol Dunster. And here I thought I just wanted to survive. Hello, Alexander. Nate Vanderzee is here. So Nate has been putting out some killer videos on WASD 20 lately. I don't know if he went to film school or what, but it seems like he got a new camera or something. And Nate, I just want you to know that in your last few videos, I've noticed the camera work, and it just makes them even better to watch. If you're not subscribed to WASD 20, you need to go subscribe. He also has Sellsword Maps, which is the map company that we hired to make our map of Dragon Grin. I'm very excited about that. So check out WASD 20. Check out Sellsword Maps. Really, really good, solid content. Nate Vandersea says, aw, shucks, thanks, man. Of course, dude. Mike Lasham is here. Also a fantastic game master. Nathan Thurston is here. So, let's go on to another hack. The next hack is, you're trying to prep a session, and it can be easy for it to all turn to spaghetti. Okay? You're like, well, I want there to be this guy, there's an NPC, or I want this NPC, and he's got this item that he's going to try to sell to the players. But, so I need there to be a marketplace, and I want there to be a marketplace. But then the town guards have to, and it's like, you've got all these elements. So here's the second hack. You need to work with containers. You need to work with big boxes, okay? So here is what you need to do. Start with scenes. As simple as this sounds, say, I want a scene that is like the beach scene at the beginning of Saving Private Ryan. That's what I want. That's what I'm doing. That's it. Now I'm imagining that, and I draw my little square. Maybe you can even map it out on a napkin. Something super, super basic. You just draw a box, and it says beach battle or beach invasion or whatever it is. Now I drop things into that container. But by doing that, and I would say prep 3, because depending on how long your games are, those 3 major scenes are going to be, depending on how roleplay heavy your players are and how much they explore, that could go 4 hours. And you might not think so, but I'm telling you, that's a side note, is that a lot of game masters don't just prep too granularly. They don't just prep the wrong things, but they prep way too much for one session. And here's what happens. They got this cool beginning, then 4 or 5 scenes in the middle. Oh, it'll just go by quick. And then some big climactic ending. And then before you know it, you're cutting out 2 scenes in the middle that were important, and you're pushing for your ending, and it feels rushed, and the pacing's weird, and you spent way too much time in places that didn't really need to be in the session. So, decide on 3 distinct scenes and fill them up like buckets. Now, here's what's important about these scenes. You need to decide what's happening in these scenes without the heroes intervening. Here's another trap. Game masters will say, okay, so I want this beach scene, and then this, Barker's character is going to be here, and then Matt's character is going to be here. And no, That's not how the real world works. The real world is going to go on without your players. This is how you make a good encounter. This is how you make a good scene. What is happening? Erase the players. The players don't exist. What's happening without them there? There's a boat crashing to the shore. Troops are spilling out of it. Immediately there's something to interact with in there. There's immediately something going on in the scene. A lot of game masters, they feel like they've under-prepped because when the scene happens, it's sterile and it's stagnant because it's static. It's sterile and stagnant because it's static. It's a static scene. It's a photo. Your scenes can't be photos. They have to be motion pictures. So you can't just have your players and a beach. You have to think, what's going on? If my players never showed up here, what's generally happening? This boat is crashing up. There is a special sand cavalry unit that's piling down the hill, trying to meet this boat. And in between, there are these arcane landmines just floating a foot above the sand. And one of them explodes. What would happen if the players were never there? That is how you need to prep that scene. So now already, I have myself a good opportunity to let my players, and I describe all that to them. And that's how the scene starts. Okay, you're in your small raft. You tumble out, and then I explain what the beach looks like, and I say, what do you do? Now, that's how I would do it. I would prep 3 of those, essentially. Now, this gets into a side discussion that I won't get into right now. Well, what about railroading, and what about player agency? I try to play my games like episodes of television shows, and you will have agency, but I am going to have those scenes planned out. So I'm going to make it clear where, if I do my job, the next place will make sense. And if you're like, well, what if I don't want to go there? Well, that's fine. I've got a bonus tip at the end for if the players want to go totally off the reservation, how you can still absolutely work that into the mix. So that's hack number, I lost count, but that's another hack, which is decide on 3 distinct scenes and fill them up like buckets. Another hack. Well, actually, pause, time out. Let me check the chat. Josh Glisson is here. Scott Hustis is here. The Mapronomicon is here. Bill Mangan says, Nate rocks. The Mapronomicon says, I've found also that if a person doesn't actually have an idea of what kind of player character they want to play, you can ask if they have a favorite book or a favorite movie, a person on TV they enjoy, and then create their character based on that. That is such good advice. In fact, if you watch, we have a video called Our Mom Plays D&D, and this is exactly what we did. She was brand new to the game, fresh-faced and wide-eyed, and we did that exact thing, and immediately she latched onto a character concept, and we got going. So that's actually a great tip, Mapronomicon. Circo, what's going on, man? Hope you're having a good day. BJ Hall, what up, everybody? Josh Glisson says, what's crack-a-lackin'? What's crack-a-lackin'? We be prepping and hacking. I'm from the streets. Aaron Knight, I'm guilty of having baddies floating in the void until the players show up. I'm telling you, man, we all are, I think, to a degree. And that is what I'm telling you. That simple hack will change the way you prep. What was the bad guy doing before the players even dreamt of coming there? What's he doing? And don't make it, like you said, don't add more elements to the stagnant static. Don't be like, well, now he's standing there and there are hostages. It's like, no, you want to get gritty? He just executed a hostage. That happened. The bad guy executed a hostage, and the bank manager tried to make an escape for it, and now he's got the bank manager by his balding hair, and the heroes come in. Now it's like, well, what do we do? It's not just, these mobs from World of Warcraft floated around, going back and forth until the heroes walked in, and then they're, exactly that. But just by doing that, and it doesn't even have to be people. It can be the scene itself. The bank's on fire. Just things that are happening to where it's like, hey, this is going to happen whether you're here or not. This bank is going to burn down unless you do something. Or all these hostages are going to die unless you do something. Like, that will continue to happen. You enter, and the old screenwriting adage, in late, out early, in late. All right, 2 hostages are dead. What do you do? Alexander Kostick. I love asking my players to describe the scene and what they see, smell, or hear in the scene. I think it can relieve GM stress, provide more time to think of something cool to add up. So it's a team effort. This is mainly for improv. That's brilliant, brilliant advice. I also think, and I'm not suggesting you don't do this, but as game masters, I feel like there's this stigma that we have to know everything. And I think it's stigma we place on ourselves. It's this pressure we place on ourselves. And I think when we admit to the players and make it that sort of back and forth, that it's liberating and creates more fun. So if I don't have something prepped, I have found that it's much easier for me to go, hey, you know what? I hadn't given that any thought. Let's talk through this real quick. I'm thinking it could be something like this. What do you think? Oh, I think that. Okay, great. Let's role play it like that. Let's go with that. I'm also a big fan of, if it kind of grows and evolves as the sessions go on, retcon it. We're not writing a novel. We're not making a motion picture script. We're allowed to go back and say, hey, can we just say that this person was actually, Joe John's brother? Because that really clicks with the rest of the plot. It's like, oh yeah, that would be great. So totally, Alexander. And I think as game masters, if we just let that go and admit when we don't have something prepped or when we want to throw it to the players to improv, I feel like it strengthens that bond and that team effort. Melvin says, what I try especially for one-shots is to bring one life goal, one place, one person. I kind of freestyle the rest. And that's actually a really good way to do it. So where I said 3 scenes, you're doing like 3 elements. And I still think that's a really solid way to do it. And as long as you make those alive, then, and acting and working without the players, I think that goes a long way to make it feel realistic. Dragon X Benedict, your players don't exist. Excellent idea for creating a world that applies to all mediums of storytelling. It's true. It's like, what's going on when the heroes aren't around? Okay, make that interesting. Make that interesting by itself. Now the heroes are there, and they have a chance to change the way that the timeline goes. They're the catalyst for this adventure to actually be an adventure and to matter. Chris Wilhelm is here. Chris Wilhelm is running a game tonight in, I believe it's pronounced Strathmere. It's really cool. It's like a weird Wild West with a twist, but you should check it out on Drop Dice's channel tonight. He's going to be running that game, and I'm going to tune in at least for part of it. I'm really looking forward to watching it when it's done, though. But he's given a lot of thought to the world, and I love how it's developing. Chris is one of the best concept art sort of like treasure hunters that I know. So I'm really interested in seeing how that goes. Rob Coletta says, with a campaign, I always decide one narrative objective per session. Something develops the story each time. That's a great way to do it. Because then, if that's the pillar, you can kind of hang other things on it as you progress. So, let's hit another hack. And this is a big one. For all you writers, I think most game masters really are writers in some way. Stop plotting and start challenging. Stop plotting and start challenging. Here's what I mean. And I did this. I actually did this to myself. Came up with this awesome storyline. And it was going great. And the players were kind of having a good time and all was well. And I realized, like, an hour into the session, I was like, I don't have any challenges. This is just a narrative. This is just a story. Now, you're like, well, Tim, duh, that's the point. Well, no. To me, when I play Dungeons & Dragons or any RPG in general, I like some that are still a game. I like there to be an element of, here are the mechanics, here are the laws that govern how you interact with the world so that you can overcome challenges and feel that sense of fulfillment. That's important to me. So, it's not just about having a good plot. If you find that your scenes are like, I thought that scene was going to be really powerful, why did it fall flat? It fell flat because you told a story and then the players are just like, okay, are we done here? So, while a good role play session is key, there still should be a challenge. Now, is there room for just off-the-cuff role play? Absolutely. Absolutely. But to me, that's the grout that holds these pieces together. That should not be the main centerpiece because of the kind of story I want to tell. If that's your group and that works for you, awesome. But that's really hard to prep. That's the key there. It's very difficult to prep for that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to interject little moments of travel and downtime where the players can have moments together. And you've seen this in some games that I've played in online. Whether it's the Provokers, the Lore Keepers, putting that in the Dragon Grin games, those little moments where the characters get to joke and have... That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you need to tie a distinct in-game challenge to the scene. I'll give you an example. If your plot or your prep is like, oh, and then there's going to be this surly dwarven magistrate that's going to give the players a hard time. You kind of make some notes, all right, and then you get to the game and you're like, why isn't this going the way I planned? Well, because there's not a clear challenge. Make it so that they, the players, need to convince this person of something or lie to him about something. There has to be a specific challenge. So, for instance, this dwarf has access to records that they need. Now, there's a meaning behind this. So whether they lie, they cheat, they steal, they sneak around and break in, if you're wondering, like, why aren't the players being active? It's because you're not giving them a target. Don't just tell a story and say, well, this dwarven magistrate is giving you a hard time. No, this dwarven magistrate is giving you a hard time, and he's not letting you gain access to the archives that you have to gain access to. What do? That way, there's a specific challenge tied to the scene. And then you're going to find your players get very crafty. Their ingenuity comes out, and they can... this is where they're going to surprise you. And because you've given them a direct challenge, that gives them something to sink their teeth into and kind of push for. So instead of like, there's a giant beast on the loose. Okay, is it dangerous? What's it doing? No, there's a giant beast on the loose who will eat all of the crops. Not a meat eater, but this beast will eat all of the crops and is systematically working its way west. If we don't stop it, we'll all starve. Okay, that's the challenge. Not just, there's a giant monster, roll initiative. I mean, that can be cool, but instead, you're giving them a challenge. The challenge is, stop the creature from eating the crops. Okay, now we go, all right, how do we do that? Boom. So stop plotting and start challenging. So make sure that if you put something in the game, there's some sort of challenge, and it doesn't have to be literal, like a skill check, but you have to put something that taxes the players into the game. That's a little bonus tip. Hit points are not the only thing you can tax. There are resources. Tax them actual money. What if your players need to spend money? What if there's a reason, like their gear costs double to repair, or the city is in a shortage of supplies because of this monster, and so everything costs double, and you're just taxing their resources? Go around the character sheet. What else can you tax? And just throw stuff like that in there. Like, okay, to get into the Thieves Guild, it costs a level 1 spell. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you're level 3 or level 2, you're like, oh, okay. It's like, you got to be watching your resources, so that's just a bonus tip. You can tax a lot more than just hit points. Let us check the chat. BJ Hall says, poop yeah! It's got to all be happening because it's a sandbox. If the players want to build within, it builds itself. Chris Wilhelm said, just made it. You did, man. Circo says, what's up, Chris? Melvin Victorio says, don't forget name generators. I've saved so many awkward silence moments with them. Absolutely. In fact, for me, if you want to do some basic prep, because some people get prepitis. They're like, I'm going to make a new monster. That's a whole nother can of worms. You do not need to be making just reskin the monster. There are thousands of D&D monsters. And if nothing else, just switch out one ability for something you think you really need. But I could probably run an orc as 10 different monsters and you'd never know. Anyway, that aside, if you do want to prep, names are really tough on the spot. So come up with like 3 place names, and they could be anything. 3 place names, 3 NPC names, that kind of stuff is pretty easy to prep. And if you want to just make a little list, because then it's specific to the town and you don't accidentally use an elvish name for a dwarven blah, 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 if that stuff matters to you. But yeah, I agree. Harry is here. What's up, Harry? Chris says, you're going to see 2 of these tips tonight. Oddly already prepped without this help. Dude, same wavelength. I think this is stuff you learn from experience. I used to prep so much, and then I was like, if it wasn't, I felt like I was either prepping and then it wasn't being used, or then I would prep and realize I didn't prep the right stuff and the session wasn't going well. Carol Dunster says, so the times I've given my players a challenge are the ones I remember as a DM, and the players did surprise me with how they dealt with it. Very good to remember. That's it. It is still a game. It is a role-playing game, but the way that I play, I'm not just getting together to improv stories, because I like to have a game element. So there has to be a challenge. What challenge is taxing the players? And it could tax their minds. It could tax their emotions. Think of any of those jaw-dropping scenes in shows like The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. No spoilers, but that taxes the players' emotions, seeing those kinds of things. So yeah, it's about challenges, but you can also make sure that, like I said, that grout of role play, I'm not saying remove that. You can kind of use that to tie those challenges together. Dragon Egg says, I like to take one thing from 2 sessions ago and make it enhance a challenge in some specific way. For instance, the dwarf that has access to records they need lost money when they took an extra day to collect loot from the dragon's lair. He insists that they owe him money and refuses to help until they right what he sees as a great injustice. Okay, that was a little lame. No, it wasn't, but I think I made my point. So, James pointed this out to me. We call this pulling a Justified. In the show Justified from FX, whenever they need something to happen, whenever they need conflict to arise, at least half the time, it's conflict from someone you already know, from exactly what Dragon Eggs Benedict is describing. What happened in the downtime? Basically, make your players choose, and depending on what they choose, write down, let such and such a hostage die. That's a big point. And like he's saying, 2-3 sessions later, when you have a city guard that is doing a routine inspection, all of a sudden the city guard starts getting mouthy and pushing you and all this other stuff, and you find out that it was his sister in the bank that was robbed. And that kind of stuff too, man, it'll hit, and it'll hit the players right in the heart, and it will create a sense of verisimilitude in the world. Like, oh my gosh, all these people are, they're around. So yeah, very good. So, this is the bonus hack. This is the final thing I'm going to tell you, because we talked about like prep and, well, what happens when the players go totally off and they do something that I really, really, really don't expect. I call this, what's the worst thing that could happen? Here's what I do. To kind of go back to up in the chat, there's some comments made. It was like, ask the players to help you describe it. I've gotten over the fact that if they say, we want to go see the king, and I have nothing prepped, I'm not going to try to pretend like I just was that good and I knew you were going to ask to see the king. It's like, I'm past all that. I'll go, okay, all right, let's talk this out. All right, so explain how you want to do that. So I'm throwing things out there. I'm just, okay, all right, so what do you want to do to go about this? All right, so how would this work? And then I would admit to them. I'd say, okay, well, I don't have anything specific prepped for this, but I've got some ideas. Then, when they tell you, well, here's how we want to do it, what's the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen with what they describe to you? We want to get onto the town public transportation because we know it passes, by the castle. And we want to ride that to the castle. And then we want to use our forgery papers to see the king. Now, I could say, well, the transportation breaks down, but that's not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is they are now under scrutiny, and those forgery papers. So now all of a sudden this brand new scene's opening up. So I don't want to make it so that the forgery papers are automatically discovered, because that wouldn't be fair. But what I would do is I would make that the scrutiny. What is the worst thing that can happen? Well, the worst thing that can happen is you get caught with false papers trying to get in to see the king. To me, that's treason. And treason means death. So in that case, I'd go, okay, let's narrate it. Let's talk it out. What does the wagon look like? All right. It's a bumpy ride. What are you doing within the wagon? Okay, great. Boom. Okay, you arrive. Rob, for performance check. Describe to me, let's talk through what we think this guard looks like. And all of a sudden, I'm not pretending like I just had all this in my head and I'm just spitting it out. We're working together. It's a collaborative story. You went somewhere that I didn't plan for, but now I promise you these players will remember this forever. Because you're involving them in the process, and they're going to, what if he's, and they can even make it as simple so that anyone can participate. Make it as simple as, he looks like a running back for the Seattle Seahawks. Perfect. All right, so, he looks like this guy. He's got this beard. He's got, this, thick black dreadlocks. And it's all of a sudden, that's it. And everybody's envisioning this person. All right, what do you do? All right, we show them the forgery papers. And now you start role-playing this scene. But what's the worst thing that can happen? This guy is on the lookout for false papers because people have been using them all around the city. That's the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is my plan that I think could probably work is poorly timed because someone else is counterfeiting papers. That's what I mean by what's the worst thing that can happen. Take something and put it in the dead middle between the players and their goal. And by doing that, you don't have to have a whole scene done. You don't have to have this thing ready. So if in the Copper Jackals game on Saturday they say, well, we want to go to such and such a fortress. Okay. And I would think, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then I throw it to them. All right, how do you want to get there? I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't really have this properly prepped, but let's talk this through. And then we go. And I have never played with anybody that would have a problem with that. I think that people respect it, and as long as there's transparency and you work together, the game's still awesome. All right, let's see here. Sean Murphy says, I use TV show characters when trying to come up with an NPC on the fly. Easiest thing ever. Sean, so do I. In fact, we have a video about that. Especially because your version of that TV character is never going to be the exact version, so the players probably won't even be able to pick it out. I love James Spader as Raymond Reddington in the television show The Blacklist, but even my best Raymond Reddington is not going to touch James Spader's. So it's funny because I'll do that in a game, and I'll have varying guesses. Were you being so-and-so? Were you being so-and-so? A lot of people see Carrie Eloise in Quintrek Coppermist that I play on the Winds of Ursuline. Quintrek Coppermist is actually based on Martin Freeman's Bilbo Baggins. So I don't know if I've ever shared that, but that's who I'm trying to emulate, is Martin Freeman from the Hobbit trilogy. And did you think that before I said it? Probably not. But now you can never unknow it. But yeah, Sean, that's a great idea. Scott says, the one game I made and ran for some friends, I have then two options right near the beginning. One, find the location that all the zombies are heading to. Or two, quest given by the blacksmith to check or help the 3 farmsteads in the area. Each house had its own challenge of people holding out or running from the zombies, given an option inside or heading back to the main location. Perfect. And then that way, you give them options. And you've got your stuff prepped. Now here's the thing. We want to go to the abandoned church. Uh-oh. Well, it's fine. I'm going to take one of those challenges from the house, and I'm going to drop it right in the church, and I'm going to reskin the person to be a, Paylor cleric. That's it. I take the same challenge, and I drop it in there. So that's what I mean by buckets. They don't go to any of the farmsteads. They don't go to any of the zombies. They want to go to the source of the evil and find the graveyard. All right. Well, that's where we're going to talk it out. Carol says, yes, what's the worst thing that can happen is where I was in my last session. They wanted to do something I was entirely unprepped for, and I ended up just asking them how we do it. Not at your level, but I'm sure it worked as a novice DM. This helps me to be ready next time. But that's great. Carol, you handled that right. Hey, I'm not ready. I didn't fully prep for this, but let's figure it out. This is going to be a blast. This is the definition of collaborative storytelling. You're not a bad game master if you do this. In fact, I think you're a better game master than somebody who uncomfortably tries to fake it. Now, if you've got something in mind and you want to run with it, that's fine. And if you're comfortable doing that, do it. And if you're good at it, great. A lot of people aren't. And this is why they over prep. Because they try to prep for this, and prep for this, and prep for this, and prep for this. And guess what? Guess what? The 12 locations you prepped, the players are still going to go to a brand new one that you didn't even think of. And that's why it's important to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take this, and what was once the graveyard is absolutely now the market. Like that. All right. And then Scott says, you can't be ready for what your players could randomly do. Alexander Kostick, I think the problem of what GM intended and forced on players is usually reserved for younger and inexperienced game masters. I admit, I was a horrible game master when I was a teenager. And I mean it. I would literally add some entities preventing players from achieving goals. So funny when I think of it now. I was the same way. And that's why I think hearing this from other game masters is like, listen, it's okay to let them do whatever. Because you can always come up with new plots, and by using these hacks, you'll know, okay, I need to prep. I need to prep. That's what I'm going to call this video. Preppin'. It allows you to prep the right 10%. And then if you want to prep that 15, 20%, where you're like, okay, I'm going to do some town names, I'm going to do some NPC names. Then if you're done and you're feeling really good about it, you can design a monster, but it's not necessary. It's just for fun. It's sheerly for fun. Carol says, oh, I didn't want to fake it. I wanted to railroad them into what I had in mind. Glad I realized that wasn't working before I went any further with it. Exactly. Chris Wilhelm says, collaborative storytelling is the hardest part to learn as a GM. Practice it often. It's true. I didn't realize how collaborative an RPG could be until I played in the Provokers and the Winds of Cercily. And I realize now, working with the players is like having 4 really good, passionate writers fleshing out their own TV shows. And then you bring them all together for like the Avengers movie. It's like no one is going to outdo, like no game master will outdo a passionate player when it comes to background and player history and the town they're from and all this other stuff. Because it's their sheer primary focus. So, anyway, hopefully those game prep hacks were helpful to you. Hopefully these are game prep hacks that are going to be easy to use and that you can incorporate them right away. I am very excited to see how the Copper Jackals game goes on Saturday. Be sure to sign up for Brigade Con. If you're watching this and you're not signed up, it's free. All the proceeds go to charity. Check out the Tabletop Terrors YouTube. We got a pretty crazy video up there with a couple of new additions to the channel. But yeah, this has been great, and I love you all. Thank you for tuning in. We'll probably do this again tomorrow, and until next time, may your dice roll high.